Hello everyone, my name is Asher. I'm 20 years old and I was diagnosed with fear of harm 5 years ago in 2015. I'm gonna speed through some background about my experiences with fear of harm, pre-diagnosis, pre-ketamine, and then I'm gonna talk about my experiences after I was diagnosed and got treatment and how my life has changed. So for some background, even before I was diagnosed with fear of harm, I was no stranger to psychiatry. I was hospitalized when I was 12 years old for my first noticeable manic episode. Despite that, I was not correctly diagnosed as bipolar 1 until about 2.5 years later in 2015, a few months before my fear of harm diagnosis. So when I was diagnosed with bipolar, I finally got to be on the right meds after a long history of trial and error. And this was a big positive change in my life. And I started feeling a lot better. My mania and depression evened out a lot. But I found that I was still experiencing a lot of really distressing symptoms that I was not sure how to explain. For some background to all of this, even as a young child, I struggled to sleep at night, often suffering vivid nightmares. I couldn't settle into bed at night without performing little rituals, little routines before, so I would be able to fall asleep. I experienced a lot of irrational but intense fears to a point where fear of getting sick affected my eating and I was very underweight. I had those symptoms when I was a young child and that was never really addressed. I lived in a lot of anxiety and confusion surrounding the world, and when I started exhibiting really strong bipolar symptoms, that was all anyone really talked about. But once that was a little bit under control, in the summer of 2015, which was a very hot summer, I was experiencing a lot of things that still weren't good. For a while I'd been sleeping on the couch in the living room because I didn't feel safe sleeping anywhere else in the house. No matter where I slept, I had dark and distressing dreams. I experienced intense social anxiety bordering on paranoia. I wore mirrored sunglasses in public so that people wouldn't be able to look me in the eye. I felt like I could never trust that the people in my life cared about me, that they weren't going to betray or abandon me. I would jump out of my skin at unexpected noises or touch. The whole world was hostile and it was affecting my rational thinking. And I knew the fears didn't make any sense, but I could never escape the feeling. I had to react. So at that point, I started doing research into mental illnesses besides bipolar disorder because I was like, what's going on with me? I read about every personality disorder in the book, and nothing ever looked like what I was experiencing. I felt like I was fundamentally damaged or possessed, that something was going wrong completely outside of my control. But fortunately, my mom was also doing research, and she made an appointment for me with Dr. Papalos in the fall of 2015. I was supposed to fill out some questionnaires for him about my symptoms. And looking through them, it was like they were designed specifically for me. All these things that I couldn't really identify in anything I had read or heard about mental illness were lined up in front of me in a way that made me realize, hey, maybe this is the answer. So I had an appointment and then scheduled another one after that first one, and on that second appointment was when I finally got the ketamine. And the first time I took the ketamine was in New York City. I went with my mom, and obviously it's a very busy and stressful environment for somebody so hypervigilant and anxious all the time. As much as I love the city, it was a big trip somewhere to go, and I was under a lot of stress, and I was also not sure or confident that this treatment would even work for me because I had had such a long history of just being on the wrong meds and having doctors just be wrong about whatever was going on with me. But I was not able to hold that thought for long. I went into the office and I got the ketamine. At that point, it was a very low dose compared to what I'm on now, but it was my first time. And as soon as they give it to me, I'm trying to think, this isn't gonna work, this isn't working. But I felt calm and I felt well in a way that I had not felt in a very, very long time, perhaps ever. I wasn't afraid once we exited the office and went back into the city. The loud noises, the strangers bustling around me that had caused me so much stress just didn't bother me. The best way I could describe it, it just evened out that sense of everything being hostile and aggressive in my environment. I felt more at peace than I had in ages. And I'm not trying to portray ketamine as like miraculously curing me, because that's not the case with anything, but there is direct and immediate relief of symptoms once you take it. So some long-term effects now that I've been on ketamine for 5 years. I've had my dose adjusted like a couple of times, and now it's at a place where I'm feeling very comfortable with it. It has really, really reduced my jumpiness and reactivity to stimuli, essentially. Things that I was hypervigilant about, things that would really disrupt my sense of peace, I find that they're a lot less bothersome to me. And intrusive thoughts and fears that I had that were so irrational and so overpowering become a lot easier to reckon with. You can kind of detach yourself from that fear and recognize that it's coming from somewhere that doesn't make sense, that is internal, that's just a reaction. Essentially, it brings back a sense of stability and reality in your life where everything has been feeling unreal and uncertain. And with that, my communication skills improved a ton. It feels like finally being able to talk to people for real rather than playing some kind of game with a fake version of them that you have in your head. It always felt like there was some kind of barrier between me and the people I was speaking to. And over time, as I've been on the ketamine treatment, that has lessened, and I've been able to connect with people in a way that is much more genuine and much less stressful and strenuous. So about my education experience, prior to being on ketamine, I was actually homeschooled. I spent a lot of my life homeschooled, with a few years here and there in private and public schooling. I eventually had to leave middle school and then high school when I attempted it, because I was very, very mentally ill and at the time not getting the right treatment. But once I was on the lithium and then later the ketamine, I was actually able to go back to a school for a few years. It was not a traditional school, but it was definitely a school environment with people, and I was able to flourish in a way that I just did not have the capacity to before my treatment. I made friends, I worked on creative projects that were important to me, and eventually I got my GED and started working, which was really impressive for me, considering around that time I had not even expected to live that long with the symptoms that I was having. Ketamine was really revolutionary in my life in that it gave me a future that I didn't even think was possible for me. I was able to come to terms with aspects of my identity that I had been too afraid and self-destructive to understand before. I was able to process things in my past that I had no frame of reference for understanding besides that sense of dread and terror that I was always wrapped up in. It allowed me to be open with others rather than hostile and guarded. Allowed me to begin to trust, to find some sense of reality free of distortion. I had unsuccessful experiences with therapy prior to ketamine treatment because I was not willing to confide in the therapist or listen to any of their advice. I was very defensive and, as such, unwilling to let people in to help me. But since ketamine, I have been able to open up with therapists, and I am now on a very fulfilling journey, working with my therapist towards understanding my life, things that have happened to me, and my own symptoms. It has allowed me to accept help when I need it, and it has given me that courage. One thing that I have not mentioned so far, but is actually very, very important, is that the overheating factor of fear of harm is really central to this whole disorder. I've been talking about the mental, psychological, behavioral symptoms right now, but all of that really comes from the fact that it's a sensory processing issue. Your body cannot regulate your temperature correctly when you have fear of harm. So ketamine has an effect on that on its own. Ketamine actually does a lot for the thermoregulatory problems, but that's only one piece of the puzzle. I've had to like leave jobs that I've worked at because of the temperature conditions making me too symptomatic to work, including working in kitchens in front of hot stoves and also canvassing outdoors one summer, which I had no business being out in heat like that. Part of living with fear of harm has been learning to understand your physical limitations when it comes to temperature, and making sure you're keeping yourself safe, keeping yourself healthy, and practicing cooling techniques. Ice packs, cooling pads, fans, lukewarm baths, things like that that help bring down your internal temperature, because with your temperature rising, you will be experiencing more mental health symptoms. Yeah, temperature regulation and also regulation of sleep. Your sleep cycles will be pretty disrupted when you're bipolar in general, and with fear of harm partnered with the temperature thing, it's going to be extreme. So making sure that you maintain a regular sleep schedule, regular temperature regulation practices, and of course taking the ketamine. Those are the 3 parts of fear of harm treatment that are going to make it so that you can live a great life compared to without anything, or even just on the ketamine with ignoring temperature things. For a long time, I didn't really understand the severity of the temperature dysregulation aspect of fear of harm, and I would overheat or ignore that I was overheating and suffer immensely from it. So one thing that has really improved my life has been being cognizant of that and taking measures to keep myself cool. Yeah, 5 years since my first dose, my life is so different from how I could have ever imagined it being. Like I said, I did not think I would make it as far as I did at all. When I was 15, I thought I'd be dead by 18. But I'm now 20, living with my partner of 6 years. I have my GED, I have work experience. Of course, there's a pandemic going on as I am recording this, which means that it's made it a little bit difficult to move on with my life plans. But nevertheless, I am surviving and thriving. I've been working on my own creative project as a musician, and I've been devoting a lot of time to catching up with the experiences that I was not really able to get when I was so symptomatic and stuck in my head. I've been learning a lot about people, learning a lot about the world, and I feel connected to it in a way that I was absolutely denied with the way my brain was working before this treatment. Last fall, I was honored to participate in a study being conducted at McLean Hospital in Massachusetts on the effects of ketamine on fear of harm patients. And the goal was to eventually get that diagnosis of fear of harm thermoregulatory mood disorder in the next edition of the DSM manual. So I participated in that study for the same reason I am speaking to you guys right now, to advocate for myself and others with this disorder and bring awareness to not just the fact that fear of harm exists, but is effectively treatable. Just because fear of harm is not very well known doesn't mean it's rare. It's estimated that potentially 1 in 3 bipolar patients may have fear of harm. Greater understanding of this condition in medical circles and in general can lead to many, many people who once had no way to face these symptoms getting proper diagnostics and treatment. So to conclude, I feel like it's worth mentioning that a lot of traumatic things have happened to me unrelated to fear of harm as well that have affected my life. And I do suffer from PTSD symptoms, so I can't give anybody like a perfect success story like, hey, I'm here, I'm cured, I'm thrilled in the world. But I am better than I ever could be, and for me, these have been incredible personal milestones since getting treatment. So I want to say ketamine has played a major role in allowing me to face the facts of my life, even the ugly ones, without the overwhelming dread and anger I once was conquered by. And if you take anything away from this, it's that this is something that people suffer with, but it's not something that people will have to always suffer with. If there is more awareness, if there is more treatment available for people with these symptoms, so many people who were in a position like mine, who felt like they could never get anywhere in life, really will have a chance. So thank you so much, and I hope this has been informative.